Gods from Outer Space was originally called Return to the Stars by Erich Von Daniken. A very interesting thing that one sees in this book is the mythologization of a trip from Zurich to New York, as if it was written in one of those ancient spiritual texts. A question is asked in the book about why some traditions get preserved better than others, or practiced better than others. Some of these is mere physical circumstances in terms of some disaster happens or some invasion happens because of something happens elsewhere and it affects indirectly like that. But more than anything else is how much the people that have a mythology decide to believe and practice it, and in what choices they choose to use it. Now, something that I should have said about the last program was that Uzbekistan cave drawing that I talked about. It could have been a hoodie, an ancient hoodie for all one knows, but it actually wasn't a real drawing. It was completely fictional. It was flipped horizontally, and it was in a magazine talking about ancient astronauts, that sort of thing. So that illustration was like, now the Wanjin of Australia, that is a real thing. And again, I would say, look at what people do to dress up, to get warm, to stay cool. So, and it's interesting how the sound jinn appears so much in world terms for spirits. He goes into the mystery of the stone balls. Sometimes it looks like they were made with stones that didn't come from the area. How they got there, sometimes there isn't the evidence of rolling, but I mean, hundreds or thousands of years down the line, the evidence of the rolling them from one place to another can be gone, and it's like, why would they do it? And sometimes the patterns of the stones do match up with stars and things like that. Why were our ancestors obsessed with things like flying? I'm trying to figure out smoke wise. I think I can take it. Where did our ancestors get some of their sexual ideas? Well, honestly, you look at what happened with the modern age. Both the influence of the television and movies and stuff, how it's changed certain tastes of society, and even not only legalized certain, it's led to the legalization of certain things, certainly. It's leading towards the legalization of other things and possibly the outlawing of other things. And certain materials and stuff are now common or possible that didn't used to be common. So we don't have to watch aliens have sex to, involve ourselves in whatever type of thing that we're going to do there. And the representation of the hybrids, well, look at ancient Egypt and African culture in particular. We find something very interesting when it comes to all that. The representation of what these powers mean. The morphing in terms of visions. People have visions or dreams, I guess people would be more likely to refer to. of themselves as all sorts of things. And whether it represents something or whether it's literally the case, this art does not have to mean that there were physical hybrids. Now, there were some interesting things that you see mentioned. And one of these things is all these limits of God. Not all the mythologies seem like they're projections of human limitations or failings upon the divine. But the existence of such things doesn't mean that we're not dealing, it's not trying to talk about God. It's certainly, and as well, must be talking about alien visitors, because a real God wouldn't need this, and doesn't quite work that way. I have to honor Erich Von Daniken, that in a different way than Aleister Crowley did, in terms of trying out things, to the point of trying out every drug that he couldn't get his hands on. Maybe that's actually not the case, but he seemed to have tried everything he could get his hands on just to see if his sorcery could work in that respect. And Erich Von Daniken was somebody who would physically explore, get artifacts, risk. This book was written with him in lockup. So those bits of, that going all out to get the information, that was a very important thing. And Erich Von Daniken, Zachariah Sitchin, and such were an important stage in my development as a teenager. Whitley Strieber and all that sort of stuff too. I don't necessarily believe that a lot of that is necessary to go to the same conclusions as they do. But I knew something was missing from my life and my church upbringing, and that was certainly a stage in my development, was going over all this stuff. Alternative histories and all that stuff. Now, there are real alternative histories. And let me... remember that the terms of our technology right now don't prove impossibilities for tomorrow. And could there be something that happens with our memories in terms of how we live our lives and what we've been exposed to? That's certainly the case. Why are some shapes drawn to in terms of importance? Honestly, if you throw things through the air, you're going to figure things out in terms of what may or may not work. You don't have to actually... And you look at comets and stuff like this, and you say, oh, well, the comet kind of drags like that. So what if there was a vehicle that could travel through the air like that? Ancient people did that. And there are questions that we can ask, not being in positions of authority, almost ecclesiastical in nature, that we can do when we're not, okay, there are things that we can do based on certain freedom, not being, it's like my channel is random. I do basically, I do what I want on my channel. I'm not worrying about, how liked or disliked material it is. I'm just trying to get out whatever information. I'm trying to cause people to follow along with certain material. Whatever. I'm trying to have my legacy. Now, I may direct things differently at a different point to have a greater impact on beliefs and practices and experience. But, so personal mythologization. We may want to consult all sorts of ancient texts to help us in our expression. We may want to get together a spiritual diary of some sort. we may do investigations into the world as it is. It's like all this talk of Easter Island that Erich Von Daniken and such continually bring up, is that a lot of this stuff is done without full information. I've heard claims, like, for example, about the Quran, that such and such wasn't true, and it turns out these claims are based on partial information. They start to dig up an archaeological site, and they dig up one corner. But when they dig up the other 90%, their conclusion changed. So in that particular regard, they thought differently. It's like Petra. They thought Petra was just a graveyard, because I think that's what they first encountered. So we should be careful of our conclusions. And once we gather our information in journals and stuff, we may want to write a grimoire, a method manual of how we got where we are, or how to do the same sort of things that we do. And some of my content is definitely along those lines of this can be done. And, but that doesn't mean that we're doing things per se to show off. Some things are very impossible seeming. But other things, this is the first book that it becomes very clear that his interpretation of this stuff is going off on a limb here. People use plant and animal forms in their shamanism for a long time. For us to just say that, oh, it must be antennas and all that stuff. Or instead of a grimoire, maybe another sort of spirituality book. But whatever good, whatever truth that you've personally acquired, hold on to it. Somehow pass it on. Don't let the mere social media that has been put upon us be mere social media. Let this go on to eternity, and be open to new information and new interpretations. It may surprise you.